Hello and welcome to our next set of videos. This one is over political parties. So today we're going to talk about political parties, who competes. So what's the difference between a political party and a political organization? Well, other political organizations may exist to pass legislation or to support a cause, but the purpose of a political party is actually to take control of the government and then to run it. Without this goal of running the government, you don't have a political party. What you actually have is a political organization, or otherwise known as an interest group. Only political parties want to run the government, and that's the key difference between a political party and an interest group. So how do parties do this? Well, they recruit and nominate candidates for office. They help run campaigns and elections. They organize, mobilize voters to participate in politics. They organize and operate the government. And this is where most parties actually fail and fall apart, is they can't pass legislation. And when they're out of office, they come up with a platform of policies that they want to enact. So what does this mean? Well, first of all, they recruit and nominate candidates for office. If a person looks like an interesting candidate for a political party, they'll actually approach you and ask you, hey, have you ever thought about running for office? If someone asks you this, then they're actually saying, we would like you to try running for office. They run campaigns and elections. During any candidate's campaign, there'll be a lot of people who work for them. Some of them will actually work for them directly, but most of them will actually be people who work for the political party. The people who work for the political party aren't paid for by the candidate. They don't come out of the candidate's funds. They're just people who are hired by parties to help people run their campaign. They organize and mobilize voters to participate in politics. If you do not have a ride on election day, this is an awesome thing. What they will do is that if you want to go vote, you can call either one of your party campaigns, and they will actually give you a ride to the polls to help you vote. They organize and operate the government. Once you're in government, you have to run it. It's not enough to say, no, I don't want policy. You have to actually come up with policies that you want to see run in office. Currently, Republicans are having some problems with this. They've only passed 2 pieces of legislation and a budget. People expect more from their government. And then they need to come up with a platform of policies that they want to enact. This is the problem currently that the Democrats are having. It's not enough to say, no, I don't want to do this. You also have to come up with an alternative, a policy that someone could choose instead of what's being offered by the main political party. So what are our types of party systems? Well, there are 3 main types of political systems in the world, and they are primarily based on the types of laws that are in the books concerning elections. You can have a one-party system, a two-party system, or a multi-party system. One-party systems, mostly these are authoritarian regimes. Usually they're created, but the law requires that all members of government should come from the same party, or because the electoral laws favor one party so heavily that no one else has a chance of winning. In a democracy, you can still get a one-party system, but it occurs because the other party, the party that doesn't win, is so incompetent that the electorate has no choice but to elect the one party that wins all the elections. Japan has a democratic one-party system, and so does Texas, but more on that when you actually get into the Texas system. A two-party system is what we have. It occurs when the elections are rigged so that each district there can only be one winner. This occurs in the United States and in the United Kingdom. So what do I mean by rigged? Well, I mean the rules favor it. Not necessarily so that only one particular person will win, but for example, in our district, since we're majority rule and we can only have one person win in each district, we are a two-party system. In a multi-member district, districts are larger, more than one person can win. The number of seats is based on the number of people who vote for your party. Who runs the government is based on a coalition of smaller parties who agree to cooperate in order to form a functioning government. This brings about Duverger's law. This is one of the few laws we actually have in political science. Duverger's law says that the number of parties is equal to the number of people who can win the election plus 1. So, in the United States, where one person can win each district, we get how many parties? In Japan, where 2 people win in each district, we get how many parties? And in Russia, whereas one district where 999 people can win, how many parties do you think they have? Well, in the U.S., one person can win. 1 plus 2 is 2. We have 2 main parties, Republican and Democrat. In Japan, We have 2 people winning in each district. That means we would have 3 parties. And in Russia, with their 999 member district, yes, you do get about 1,000 parties. It's one of the reasons why Putin stays in power. So what are the history of the political parties? Well, political parties didn't exist for the first few years of Congress. And Congress did very little. Why? Information cost. It's not enough that I know what you believe, and it's not enough that you know what I believe. I have to know that you know what I believe. This is what we call information cost, and it's required for anything to be done with a large group of people. You have to know who wants to cooperate with you. You have to know who wants to work against you. You have to know who's going to backstab you and who's going to betray you, and that takes a lot of time to figure this out. So because of this, it took forever to do anything in Congress. During the first term of Congress, they passed 2 bills, and that was it. So why did political parties flourish in the United States? Well, Hamilton and Jefferson. Hamilton hated Jefferson, and Jefferson hated Hamilton. They were fighting over Washington. Hamilton would usually win their fights, but sometimes he would lose. So to get at Jefferson during those times when he would lose, he organized his friends in Congress, who would pass ideas through Congress when Jefferson would win Washington in their arguments. Jefferson, not being a stupid person, figured this out very quickly. Jefferson organized his friends and worked to oppose Hamilton and Hamilton's ideas. Hamilton and his friends called themselves the Federalists. Jefferson and his friends called themselves the Democratic Republicans. You didn't tell anyone back home which party you belonged to because it didn't really matter outside of Congress which party you belonged to. Later on, when Hamilton dies in the hands of Burr, the Federalist Party fades away because it was primarily led by the sheer will of Hamilton. And we go to a one-party system. So parties then were not what we think of today. The party didn't help you run for election. No one knew which party you belonged to back home, nor did they really understand what party was when you asked them about it. So why did this change? Well, it changed because Andrew Jackson wanted to be president and was famous enough to do it without actually having to take a stand on any issue. So he didn't. Jackson's strategy was this. As a Democratic Republican, he told his friends to tell their constituents that he was from the same party and held the same beliefs. The only problem at the time was that all Democratic Republicans didn't hold the same beliefs. So what do I mean by this? Well, let's say that Jackson was in the South, and one of the main things that caused the Democratic Republicans to be split was the idea of whether or not we should tariff goods that come from other countries. And so someone in the South would yell out in the audience, "Colonel Jackson, give him hell!" That was his fight theme when he was a general and a colonel. And after hearing that battle cry, Colonel Jackson would say, "Yes, son, what do you want from me?" And the person would say, "Sir, where do you stand on the tariff?" And Jackson would say, "I'm going to be strong on the tariff." And everyone would cheer, "Woo!" But then after Jackson would leave, they would go to their constituents because what does being strong on the tariff actually mean? And their local congressman would say, "Oh, well, that means that he's against it. Every time he sees a tariff, he's going to veto it." Then Jackson would go to the north. And when Jackson would go to the north, Jackson would say, "I'm going to be strong on the tariff." And everyone would cheer, "Woo!" But then afterwards, they would go to the local congressman and say, "Well, what did he mean when he said he was going to be strong on the tariff?" And their local congressman would say, every time he sees a tariff bill, he's going to vote it into effect. Now, the reason why he could do this was because, remember, at this time, all newspapers were local, and it would take months for news to get from the north to the south. And so by the time they heard that Jackson had said these things in the north, or people assumed that he said these things in the north, the election would already be over. Jackson doing this won on his sheer popularity as a war hero from the War of 1812. But here's the thing, not everyone liked Jackson. His second election, his opponents organized against him and actually called themselves the Whig Party. Why? Well, the Whig Party was the name of His Majesty's loyal opposition in Great Britain. And they thought of Jackson as being a monarch in the making, so they wanted to choose a name that would really, really accentuate this. They put forth a war hero of their own, and they ran against Jackson based sheerly on popularity, war hero versus war hero. Today, this would be the equivalent of running an election as Jay-Z versus Dr. Dre for president. Jackson's era was characterized by presidential elections that were popularity contests, candidates that would not take any political policy stances during elections, and therefore we would get numerous forgettable presidents because the real leadership at the time actually came from the Senate, not from the president. Then suddenly issues started to matter. Democratic Republicans noticed that there was an issue that everyone cared about: slavery. So being revolutionary once again, they took a stance on the issue and came out as being pro-slavery. The Whig kept running elections like popularity contests and were trounced, time and time again. It wasn't that people stopped voting for the Whigs either. Rather, the candidates noticed that if they took an anti-slavery stance, they could win more votes. But if the Whigs refused to do so, well, however, there was a small party called the Republican Party who took a stance. So the Whig candidates stopped running as Whigs and started running as Republicans. The rest is history. The biggest lesson from the Civil War was that if a party does not take a stance on a major issue, then they will be replaced by a party that does. As a result, anytime a third party gains too much support for one of its issues, one of the major parties comes in and steals its political stance. This keeps the two parties as strong as they are. For example, Democrats steal farm issues from populists. Republicans steal immigration issues from the Liberty Party, etc., etc., etc. So what do the parties believe? Well, these lists actually come from each party's own website. Republicans, in their own words, believe that the country is exceptional. The Constitution should be honored, valued, and upheld. Leaders should serve people, not special interests. Families and communities should be strong and free from government intrusion. Institution of traditional marriage is the foundation of society. Government should be smaller, smarter, and more efficient. Healthcare decisions should be made by us and our doctors. Paychecks should not be wasted on poorly run government programs. Military must be strong and prepared to defend our shores. Culture should respect and protect life. Children should never be left in failing schools. Veterans should have the best care and opportunities in the world. Social programs should help lift people out of poverty, and America should be energy independent. Now, this list right here is another weakness the Republican Party currently has. What's the plan? We have a list of things here that would be nice to do, but what do they mean specifically? It's almost as if this is Jackson once again saying broad, exceptional things and letting local leaders fill in the blanks however it needs to be filled in. And we see this really affecting the Republicans this year during the legislative session. If the Republicans would have had a plan, actual policy ideas, that instead of going in and arguing amongst themselves for a year, Republicans would have been able to actually pass policy. Because they never came up with policy alternatives, they found themselves caught by surprise when they finally won control of the government. What about the Democrats? Well, I want you to notice the Democrats are a bit more specific. In fact, each one of these things is a link on their website that actually takes you to more specific policy prescriptions. Their idea for moving America forward that they ran in 2016 was that they would rebuild middle-class security by putting Americans back to work. They came up with what they called the middle-class bargain, what they would do for the middle class, cutting waste, reducing the deficit, and asking all to pay their fair share, the economy built to last, America works when everyone plays by the same rules, Wall Street reform, 21st century government transparency and accountability, lobbying reform and campaign finance reform, greater together, strengthening the American community, protecting rights and freedoms, ensuring safety in the world, quality of life, stronger in the world, safer and more secure at home, responsible ending the Iraq War, disrupting, dismantling, and defeating Al-Qaeda, responsibly ending the war in Afghanistan, preventing the spread of use of nuclear weapons, countering emerging threats, strengthening alliances, expanding partnerships, reinvigorating international institutions, promoting global prosperity and development, maintaining the strongest military in the world, and advancing universal values. Now, notice, none of these things sound nearly as awe-inspiring as what the Republicans said. However, there's a strength here, and that strength is if you go to the website where they have these things listed, if you click on any one of these bullet points, 1, 2, 3, 4, it'll take you to a link of policy prescriptions, actual laws that they want to put into effect. That means that if the Democrats are ever elected back into power, they already have listed and ready bills to go for them to pass that they want to do. Republicans didn't have that. That's why they didn't do anything the last 2 years. But these are not the only parties. They're also what we call third parties. What are the third parties? Oh, there's a lot of them. Everything from the Beer Drinkers Party, the America Nazi Party, the Christian Fingalist Party of America, the Constitution Action Party, the cool American Party, as opposed to all the lame parties, the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, Party X, the Pot Party. Oh, and the Social Democrats, the Socialist Party, the Marijuana Party, the Pacifist Party, and the Workers' World Party. Notice I didn't even list them all. There are over 103 political parties that are currently registered in the United States. All of them field a candidate every time we have a presidential election. You just don't see them all. So what do these third parties do if there are so many of them? Well, they're a test bed for new policy and platform ideas. When a third party issue becomes popular, one of the major parties will borrow the third party platform's message. They do this to avoid the mistake that the Whig Party made back during the Civil War. Well, what do parties do when they're in power? Well, first, they have to run the government. Second, they have to pass laws. Third, they have to find compromises with the party out of power when they don't have enough votes to get legislation passed themselves. Fourth, they have to pass a budget. If the government has a shutdown on your watch, it's your fault, not the president's. And congressional parties are always punished when there is a government shutdown. What do you do when you're out of power? Well, you oppose the major party in all places. You compromise when you can use it to gain a partial victory, and you come up with alternative policies so that voters have an option when the party in power fails. Why is it so important to do this? Well, this is the lesson we learned from the Nazi Party out of World War II. See, third parties can be very dangerous. So what makes a third party so dangerous? Well, let's say you take idea one, the Republican idea, and you try it, but it doesn't work. Then you try idea two, the Democrats' idea. But what do you do if that doesn't work either? If the major parties do not do what they're supposed to do when in or out of government, then the nation is more willing to try more and more radical ideas. And those ideas become more and more dangerous. Well, this is our lecture over political parties. Next, we'll have a lecture over elections for this section. Have a good day.